A few years ago, I needed to paint all the doors in my house. They were just too beat up. So I took them all off the hinges, brought them down to the garage, and worked through them one by one. It took forever. And in the end, it was a pain getting them all mounted again without messing up the paint job I had just done. I've made all the mistakes before, so you won't have to, because I'm gonna show you the easy way to get this done. Now, doors are a little trickier than just normal flat walls, but I promise you, if I can do it, so can you. So here's everything you need to get this job done. First of all, you're going to want a drop cloth, an angled paintbrush, ideally a small paint roller, and then you're gonna want something to hold the paint. Painter's tape. Painter's tape is an optional tool, and I'm gonna show you how to use it in this video for this particular project, but I'm also gonna show you how you can do it without painter's tape. Of course, you're gonna need your paint, and you're gonna need something to open the can and all that kind of stuff, but those are the tools that we're gonna need to actually do the job. So first, I'm gonna open the door here, and then I'm gonna put a drop cloth underneath it. That's gonna protect the floor from any drips that are likely to happen. We're gonna probably have some drips and or splatter. So using this drop cloth and spreading it out a little bit, both directions, is probably pretty smart. Then I'm actually gonna put some shims or something under the door to hold it in place. In this case, I've got a hinged door. It wants to close because it's the door from the garage. And so that's just gonna hold it open. But even if it weren't a hinged door, putting some shims or something under the door to hold it in place like this is gonna help keep that door from wanting to swing while you're painting it. It'll hold it good and steady, which is really helpful. Next, I'm just gonna prep the door a little bit by wiping it down. You could do a light sanding if you want to, just something that's really quick. But mostly I'm just trying to get any buildup, any dirt and grime that's kind of built up on it over time. I just want to quickly get that off. That's gonna help us make the paint just stick better and go on more evenly. And then next, I'm gonna tape off hinges, maybe. Again, that's optional. So this is how we're gonna tape it off. I'm gonna put tape over it. I'm not gonna worry about cutting the tape perfectly to line up with the edges. I'm just gonna tape right over these hinges. And then I'm gonna use a utility knife, or you can use a box cutter with a razor blade. And we're just gonna slice the tape right around the edge of the hinge. And then I can peel off what's around it. That's gonna give me a nice clean edge. But then I wanna push it down really well. Again, because doing that cutting and peeling it off can actually kind of pull the tape away right on those edges, which is exactly what we don't want. So I'm just gonna run a finger over it again and push them down really good. I'm gonna take off the doorknob because it's just in the way. If I'm just doing the face of the door, I don't need to worry about taking off the actual little latch of the door. But if I'm doing the edge as well, I'm gonna wanna take that off because I don't wanna paint that either. I don't need to take out the whole latch, but at least that little cover plate, just so that I don't paint that. I know this part feels boring and it feels like you're not getting anywhere when you're doing all the prepping, but first of all, by not doing tape and by not taking the door off the hinges, we're actually doing a lot less prep than we would have to do otherwise. And taking the time to do these preps, you're gonna thank me for that when you don't have paint splatters all over the place when you're done. All right, now it's time to start painting. And hack number one is that we're always gonna do the edges first. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're coloring in a coloring book and you're trying to stay inside the lines. We kind of go around the edges first, and then we can kind of fill in the middle, and we don't have to be quite as careful, so we can do it more quickly. But also, we're gonna get a more even look overall because we're gonna overlap a little bit with some of the edge painting we did. That's gonna give us the best, most even look with the roller. So we're gonna start with the brushing, we're gonna start with the edges. I'm gonna show you now, when I edge up here by the painter's tape, I can kind of go over the top of it and hopefully none of it bleeds through. But I wanna show you how I do the edging carefully here, also just with a little craft brush. And basically we're gonna do the same thing we've talked about in other videos. We're gonna use a cutting technique so we can get right up to the edge. But this little brush lets me do it so precisely. Now when I say edging, I'm talking about all of the edges. That means the edges of the door, wherever. For example, I'm not painting the backside of this door. So I wanna get all the way to these edges, and I wanna do it carefully because I'm not going around the side over here. That's staying white. And over here, I'm doing that side, but not the back. So that's all edging. But I'm also talking about the edge of each of these little panel pieces. Getting all the way into these corners with a roller very evenly is not gonna work very well. If I even get the roller in there to get paint in there, it's probably gonna end up with a big glob of paint in those corners. It's not gonna be even. So we wanna use a brush to get into any corners. And so I've done everything that can be an edge. Now for your next hack, we're going to paint carefully around each of the hinges and all the hardware. I took the doorknob off because that one's super easy and super fast. But the hinges are much more of a pain, especially because remounting it, that's the bigger pain. So we're gonna carefully go around it. Now, I taped it off, one of the hinges in the beginning, and not the other ones. So we'll go ahead, and that one we won't be as careful on. On the other ones, I'm being more careful. And as you can see here as I'm painting, it's not that hard, especially if I'm using a little craft brush. If I were just using a normal 2.5-inch wide angled sash brush, something this precise, it would be a lot more difficult. But with a little craft brush, it's super easy to get right up to it with no problem. And now here we are, it's only been a few minutes, and I've already completely bypassed the reason for why we would have taken the door off the hinges in the first place. In fact, in the time it would take to take the door off the hinges, especially remounting it, I've already bypassed any need to do that. It's so much faster with way less headache. Okay, now for doing all the smooth sections, the flat parts, I'm gonna use a small roller. I could use a big roller, but this is gonna be way more maneuverable. This is gonna help me get the paint a lot more even, and it's gonna end up a lot smoother. Now, with a good paint, I shouldn't end up with too many brushstroke looking spots, but we're still gonna get some brushstrokes and stuff. The roller is gonna help just give it a much smoother look overall in the end. It's also just gonna get the paint on there a lot smoother, so I'm not gonna end up with a bunch of kind of darker and lighter patches. This is especially helpful when I'm painting in a darker color, covering white. If you look close up here, I'll show you, you can see where I got some paint on, but it's still thin, and obviously you're gonna see a lot of white through that. That is always difficult. You'd think painting a dark color over light would be easy. No, it's pretty much just as hard as painting a light color over dark. Next, we wanna make sure we avoid drips. And the easiest way to do that is just to not get too much paint on your brush or your roller at any given time. That's why these roller trays come with this little section where you can even out the paint on the roller. It's so that you can get it nice and even and not end up with a ton of extra paint on the roller. With the brushes, you can brush against the side of the can. We've shown the rubber band trick in other videos, or you can use a tray like this as well. But mostly, I'm just making sure I only get paint right on the tip of the brush. So of course we got our drop cloth, so we're being really careful, even if we do drip, to catch something. But what do we do if we accidentally do get splatters or drips of paint somewhere other than on the door? Well, one of the easiest ways to clean that up, especially if you don't catch it right away, especially if it kind of starts to dry on, is just to use a little plastic card. You can use an old credit card, an old ID card, something that's expired. Some people will actually go buy blank ID cards that you could use like for your business and just have blank ones that they can use as little scrapers. This is just like a little free coupon that came in the mail that's expired, but it's plasticky, right? And so we can take that and very easily scrape it off. Plastic is great because it's unlikely to scratch up your tile, your hardwood, your whatever it is that you're scraping this off of. Even if you get little splatters like on your trim or something like that, you can often scrape them off pretty easily, especially if we catch them before they fully dry. Now, the other thing you can do is a lot of the times we're using water-based paint. That's what I'm using today. And if it hasn't completely dried, you can take a warm cloth or take a cloth and put some warm water in it and just let it soak on that little bit of paint, and it'll soften it up. Just soften it. It doesn't have to liquefy it, just soften it, and then you can scrape it off pretty easily with any kind of plastic scraper. Prep, maybe tape, paint the edges, roll the middle, and clean up any drips. And basically we're done. In a matter of minutes, we got a door that's painted. We didn't have to take it off the hinges, no more headache, and yeah, I love that. So let me know, what's your biggest headache when you're painting a door, or other painting related or other DIY related headaches? Leave comments below. I read every single one of them. Thanks for joining me today on Fixter. I have a couple of other videos in this playlist here that talk all about painting in your home. And if that's something that you're working on right now, every single one of these is filled with useful tips that are gonna make your life so much easier. Go check them out. We'll see you all in our next video.